I have something to confess. I was terrified of playing this first game. No, seriously. After buying it on Steam, it took a lot for me to actually gain the courage to click on it and start it. Let me explain. The game is called Ace in Space by developers Cadaver Carnival, and it's about Adrian Clark, aka NB, an asexual, non-binary human that is given the opportunity to be one of only 300 humans to experience life on an alien planet. Sounds awesome, right? But the next part is why I was scared of playing it. NB is terminally ill with cancer and coming to terms with dying young. Their symptoms first presenting as mysterious chest pain, they were told it was just anxiety. Until it wasn't. They found cancer in their lungs, and by the time they discovered it, there wasn't much they could do. Which is actually why they are selected, among other reasons, to go live on T3R4. The robots, a pacifist species called the Guardians, saw all the suffering on Earth and decided they couldn't just keep on floating by when they had potential solutions to their problems. So those 300 they selected, they're all people who are being failed by human society. The robots want to help. Those of you who know me probably know a little bit about why this would potentially scare the bejeebus out of me, but for those of you that don't, hi, I am DarkTeaTime, and I suffer from a condition called fibromyalgia, and my most notable symptom is my chronic chest pain. My entire body hurts, and I have all kinds of symptoms, but my chest is where it is worst. I spent a lot of time in hospitals, clinics, and doctors' offices where I was told over and over that I was fine, and spent the first whole year thinking I was dying with some kind of terminal illness that they couldn't find. Thankfully, I've had enough tests at this point to rule it out and was diagnosed by a specialist that was able to prove that I have fibromyalgia and not something terminal. However, those scars, that medical trauma, still exists in me. I still fear getting bad news every time I have to do any testing, and my fears with starting this game didn't end there. NB and I have a lot in common. Eerily so. We're from almost the same part of Canada, we're both asexual, we both go by they them pronouns, we both suck at math, and we have pretty similar personalities. Hell, even their room kind of matches my aesthetic. They have the same giant amethyst chunk on their desk that I do, and they never took down their little glow-in-the-dark stars on the ceiling from when they were a kid. And if I didn't move from my childhood home, I probably would still have mine up right now too. Not to mention, they kinda look like me if I was a human. Tell me you see the resemblance, right? They're a content creator that has a rad online community. They flinch at seeing how much it hurts their family to see their decline in health. I could keep going, but I think you get the picture. Seeing a character that resembles me so closely have one of my biggest fears realized, well, it's scary. So with all that, why didn't I turn tail and run screaming? The truth is, this game is so well crafted, I would have kicked myself forever if I didn't give it a chance. Which is why I think you should give it a chance too. And once you start it, you can't not love it, you know? The art is bright, colorful, and inviting, the characters are vibrant, lovable, and well written, and the music is delightfully funky and catchy. You can tell the developers Cadaver Carnival worked their asses off on it, and it shows. It's fun, it's quirky, but it's not without depth. I've seen some people complain that it didn't feel very much like a dating sim, but I think that's one of its strengths. They clearly had a lot they wanted to say, and they used this game as a vehicle for that instead of making a cookie-cutter dating sim with all the expected markers of one. But how is the romance, you might be wondering? Well, lucky for you, I played it over and over and over and dated every single character for science. And I also tried the platonic paths as well for all you aroaces out there. The romance and friendship paths are varied and all of them very compelling. All paths except for one are robots. For romance, your options are a lovable cat robot named Zipper, who is also your doctor, Saro, a plucky therapist robot who wants the best for you but sometimes forgets to take care of herself, and Pierre, a human actor who, like you, was selected to populate T3R4. For friendships and QPRs, you have Forge, the stoic tech specialist, and Fern, the kind-hearted biodiversity and gardening specialist. The game doesn't feel like it prioritizes romance over platonic connections, which I appreciated very much. I know some viewers are probably scratching their heads because it's a dating sim, but as an ace activist myself, I think it's important to show that deep platonic relationships can be just as fulfilling as romantic ones, even in a dating sim. The dominant culture at large is of the belief that romance is special and friendship is a lower form of connection, and as someone who thinks this ethos is kinda shitty, I welcome anything that hammers the message home that the connections we make can be deep and meaningful without being romantic or sexual. The game is incredibly ambitious and has a lot of meaningful commentary about life, love, mortality, disability, illness, and more. Each route was fascinating and engaging. Needless to say, I was excited to pick Cadaver Carnival's brains about it all, so without further ado, let's jump into the interview. Warning, there are spoilers ahead for Ace in Space. Thank you both so much for being willing to sit down and chat about Ace in Space. I had a blast playing it and working toward all the endings. And I'm excited to learn even more about it. Both the art and the writing are really solid and complement each other so well. Not to mention, the soundtrack is full of absolute bangers. Can you two introduce yourselves to my audience, share your pronouns if you'd like to, share what you do, and how this project came about?
Hiya, I'm Anne-Marie, also known as Candy Cadaver, and I'm the artist for Ace in Space, and my pronouns are she and they.
Hello, I'm John, aka Sad Boy. I use he, they pronouns, and I'm the writer and programmer for Ace in Space. The game actually originated as a short story that I had planned on turning into like an ARG interactive blog, like mixed media type thing. It was a story that I had written as sort of a writing therapy project while I was taking care of a family member who had cancer. I later pitched the idea to Anne to turn it into a visual novel / dating sim, and the rest is history.
What inspired you to be inclusive of ace and or aro spectrum identities in your game?
To be completely honest, it wasn't really a conscious decision. It kind of just happened. Like a lot of times when I write a character, I develop them as I go. There was a point while I was working on the story that I kind of thought, oh, they're definitely ace, and it went from there.
When developing the game, we wanted to stay as true to the original as we could. When we decided to add dating sim elements, it was important that platonic and aro options and identities were present.
As someone who is ace and most likely aro, I've always wanted to see more representation in media, so it was kind of nice to be able to provide that ourselves.
Your aspec, is the ace and or aro content based purely off of your own experiences? Or did you consult others in the community for their viewpoints as well?
A lot of the content is based on my own experiences, but some of the experiences are from my friends as well.
Like me, for example, I'm demisexual and panromantic.
One of my initial concerns before actually sitting down and playing the game was that it was an ace-centric game with dateable robots. Not because I don't like robots, but because of how bungled ace rep often is. People see us as robotic, and when we look to see ourselves in the media, we're often portrayed as cold and unlikable. Or they will straight up just be a robot. Or an alien. Or other asexually reproducing species. But you guys were seemingly very aware of this and even addressed it in one of the romance paths, which I was super happy to see. Did you feel like this was a necessary message to include? I'd like to hear more about this from your perspectives.
We are painfully aware of that trope. I did also want to add that cheeky line of dialogue about it, because it was something that was brought up to us during the marketing part of development. As someone who is aspec, non-binary, and neurodivergent, I often only see myself represented by non-humans, so I totally understand why people are tired of it.
If we had a larger cast of characters and included more humans, there definitely would have been more human rep. But we decided to go with a small cast of mostly robots.
Was it important to make sure that the robots were clearly sentient and not cold and heartless as the stereotype in media goes, and thus the stereotype of us as aspec people?
Oh, 1,000%. Having grown up with shows like Transformers, seeing the cold and heartless robots and AI definitely started to get tiring after a while. And with aliens, I've always thought it was kinda lazy to keep the trope going. I mean, Earth-made robots I can at least understand being programmed to be subservient, but aliens? They're their own species, with their own culture, thoughts, feelings, wants, desires, dreams.
Alright, man. It's time to calm down, sad boy.
Sorry, I know I can go on forever about this, so I think it's best if I just stop here.
Oh man, I kind of wanted to hear more of it. I was really impressed by the trigger/content warning message at the start of the game, and that you gave the players an option to quit to go check the full list of content warnings on the website before really jumping into the experience. Was this a feature that was present from the start, or was it something you added in at a later date? I saw some reviews on Steam talking about how upsetting some of the content was and how they weren't expecting it, but was confused because there's a warning about it both on the Steam page and at the start of the game. I was kind of curious about your thoughts on that front.
Our content warnings have always been mentioned on our pages, but we realized after getting a few comments that they are kind of easy to miss. We wanted to make sure that everyone went into the game knowing that there were potential triggers, so we did add the disclaimer in an update. Looking back on it, it was a feature we should have had from the beginning, but hindsight is 2020, you know?
Same goes for alt text and font options. We definitely dropped the ball there, but we're happy that we were able to at least add them after the fact.
Playing NB was a little spooky at times, because I have so much in common with them. Among a myriad of different similarities, I am biromantic ace, and felt like we approached relationships in pretty much the same way. Would you say NB is canonically biromantic or panromantic, or something else entirely? They seem, at least to me, to be into the romanceable characters regardless of their gender or presentation.
Yes, absolutely. While you can play NB however you'd like, they are panromantic and asexual in canon.
Okay, so the art was absolutely captivating. The colors and characters were so vibrant and fun and added so much to the experience. Did you work together on the ideas and art direction for the art, or was it solely Anne-Marie's domain to handle all the visuals without much outside input? I'd love to hear about the process, how the character design was handled, and anything else you'd like to share about the visual aspect of the game.
First of all, I want to point out that the robots you see in the game are significantly different from what they were in the original story. We decided to scale them down and make them a bit more humanoid, not only to be able to show them on screen next to humans without NB looking like an ant, but also because Candy had actually never really drawn robots before.
Yeah, it was very much learn as you go. I had never done backgrounds either, really, or much perspective or dynamic posing, and I was relearning how to draw humans too, so yeah, it was a lot.
I would make these little collages along with written references and send them to Candy to work her magic. We only ever had one issue, and that was with Zipper. Zipper was meant to be this friendly, approachable, clean, very smooth, white-plated robot. And what I received was what you now know as Ariel, who is pointy, bug-like, kind of intimidating, and has black plates.
Wow, that is quite a difference.
All I really heard was robot, and I drew a robot, so I don't know what to tell you what happened.
We went through quite a few iterations for Zipper's design before ultimately settling on the one that is in the game.
Is there any one illustration or sprite that you made that you're really proud of that sticks out to you and makes you think, damn, I made that?
Honestly, I think the thing I'm most proud of is just the robots in general. I think especially Fern. I don't think you can really tell most of the details in the game, just due to how resolution works. But if you were to zoom in, you can totally see that I drew individual blades of grass for absolutely no reason, which was fun. But I also drawing robots apparently was really fun, and I'm pretty happy with how they came out, especially considering I just didn't know how to draw them before.
While I didn't make any of the art, I do adore the CGs from Fern's date, as well as Zipper's happy ending, and the CG from Pierre and Sarah's hangout never fails to crack me up.
I loved that the overall experience didn't feel like it was too heavily stacked in one direction, if that makes any sense. For example, I find in allosexual, aromantic dating sims, the experience is heavily romance and sex-focused, and any other kind of human connection is often downplayed or excluded altogether. There's a lot of big assumptions made about the player and what they want, and a lot of them are created around the concept of a power fantasy, where anyone and everyone is wildly attracted to the main character. But in Ace in Space, there are romance paths, friendship paths, characters who aren't romantically interested in you when you're romantically interested in them. Not to mention an emphasis on community building and even personal growth. I feel like there's room here for almost any player to play the game and still have a fulfilling experience. Were you actively trying to accommodate multiple types of players while still keeping its identity as an ace-centric game? Or were you mostly concerned with catering to an ace audience?
Honestly, I didn't really think about the audience, aside from when we made the decision to split Zipper's role and add Sero as the mental health robot and a femme character. It was always intended to be ace-centric and to have platonic options, since I tend to make content that I want to consume. I also have a love-hate relationship with player sexuality in games, so I wanted to add at least one route where someone wasn't interested in more than a friendship, while making it a meaningful route.
Was there any other ace-specific types of representation you were happy you got to include in the game? I personally really vibed with the fact that not all the characters will be interested in you romantically, but you can still have fulfilling relationships of other kinds with them.
That was definitely my favorite thing to include. It's something I found lacking in games with romance. Most of the time when you get rejected, it feels like a failure. I've also appreciated how people enjoy the fact that you can just be friends with characters, and no one's really been upset or truly disappointed by the rejected routes.
What were the challenges, if any, to including ace and/or aro identities in your game?
It wasn't really hard. I think the only challenge that we faced were people on the internet just not grasping that ace people exist and date.
Crazy that is still an issue. There's a very poignant underlying theme of terminal illness, disability, mental health, and more. It felt like you had a lot you wanted to say about these topics, and I think it sets it apart from a lot of dating sims. Was this purposeful, to sort of hold a space for players who are grappling with these things in their own lives? And was it important for you, both as developers, to portray these themes in a nuanced, multifaceted way?
As I mentioned before, this project started as a way for me to vent through writing. Not only about what was going on with my grandma, but my own personal experiences with illness, mental health, etc. It's been really healing for me to see and hear the feedback from people who have had similar experiences and have found a sense of hope with our game. I think that with the game starting out as a story and then evolving into a visual novel, and then having the dating sim elements added, it helped us make sure that the topics didn't seem forced and were relevant. With these topics being things that not just myself, but many people have experienced, I felt it was really important to approach it with respect and tact.
This might sound sad, but I genuinely felt safer with Zipper than I've ever felt with doctors in real life. As someone with medical trauma, it was kind of healing to have a lens where I could experience being treated well in a medical scenario. Was Zipper written this way on purpose to quell the anxieties of any players with medical trauma as they make their way through the game?
Indeed he was. He was written as the doctor I wish my grandma had had. Someone who was kind and compassionate, who really cared about their patients and wouldn't give up if things became difficult. It's an unfortunate thing that so many of us have dealt with the same or similar traumas, but I am genuinely happy to hear that Zipper has helped ease people's anxiety around their medical care.
The way the topic of death was handled in Ace in Space was very unique in my opinion. It was life-affirming, without avoiding the darker shades of coping with mortality, and I liked that NB doesn't always make it through. Well, I shouldn't say I liked it, but what I mean is I respected the decision to make it that they don't always come out unscathed from their battle with cancer, and sometimes they don't make it out at all. Death in games is often a fail state or written in for high tension or to tug at players' heartstrings. I'd like to hear more about why you made the choice to write about death in the way that you did.
It was really important for me not to have every single ending be a happy one, not just for lore or mechanical reasons, but because I felt that having a magical cure wasn't the message I wanted to convey. It was also important that we didn't treat the sad endings as a failure. The player didn't do anything wrong, they just chose to focus on quality of life, and then their journey ended. For me, the decision was based on my own experiences with my grandma. She knew that taking time away from her treatments wasn't a good thing, but she wanted to enjoy the time that she had and to live a little more while she could. As for the discussions around death within the game, I felt it was important to show different perspectives on mortality, while not being super bleak. It was difficult for me to get into the mindset myself, especially while I was tackling grief of my own, but I found that writing Fern's scenes especially helped me with my own feelings surrounding death.
I thought it was really cool that the robot species are kind of the reverse of humans, mostly asexual with some outliers. It was a nice way of making it clear that sexual orientation isn't reliant on species or quote-unquote biological needs. That's sort of the goal with this choice, or do you even consider the robots to be asexual in the first place?
It's always hard for me to talk about this because I'm not sure if I'm making much sense, but for me it just didn't make sense for fabricated beings to be inherently sexual, especially when those beings weren't created by humans or for pleasing others in that way. That being said, with the way that the Guardian culture is, and how they interact and learn from all manners of species, it did make sense for the Guardians to have, at the very least, explored other gender expressions, sexualities, and all that. As mentioned in Zipper's route, there are many types of attraction and intimacy, and asexuality is a spectrum. As an example, I've always seen Zipper as either gray ace or even demisexual. A lot of the desire for intimacy comes from curiosity, but he also very much does enjoy touch and is open to exploring it further with a partner.
I really liked how each robot had different relationships to their pronouns and how the humans refer to them. I thought it was a really nice touch and sort of hammers home that the ways we are seen and referred to really differs from person to person, even in space and on another planet. Kind of got the vibe that you were trying to normalize the concept that everyone experiences their gender in ways unique and personal to them. Am I right in thinking that, or was there another intention there?
You got it! While we were in development and the marketing phase, we also had a lot of people misgendering characters, mostly Forge and NB. I felt like having the two discuss their feelings about pronouns was a somewhat subtle way to show people that pronouns matter and that it can be hurtful to ignore them. As for someone who uses he, they, I also wanted to add different mixes of pronouns and different reasons for them, since, as you said, gender is an experience unique to everyone. I wish that we had explored gender a bit more, but there's always next time.
Is there any character, moment, or interaction between characters that you guys want to talk about? Maybe something you were really happy to be able to include, or something you were both proud of?
I was really happy to include a lot of things, and a lot of little interactions, especially between NB and Fern, I thought were just really therapeutic to write. But some of the parodies that we decided to put in, I think, are some of my favorite things that I wrote, as weird as that might sound. We did a lot of little references to shows like The Room, Iron Chef, Cutthroat Kitchen. I don't know, they were just a lot of fun.
Oh yeah, a good reference is Friday the 13th, which is a movie series we both really enjoy. That and the survival game. We used to play that a lot. For some reason, the first time we played, I thought we'd be safe in the water, which, if you've seen the movies, you know is very incorrect. So we ended up dying right away. John still makes fun of me for this.
Yeah, I do that. I'm sorry, but it was really funny. Just, get in the water. He's not gonna get us there. He can't swim. And then we just immediately died. So when we decided to add the Friday the 13th parody scene, I knew I had to add a little reference to that just for the two of us. Just a little treat.
Did the two of you have specific favorite romance or friend paths? My personal favorite romance paths were Zipper and Pierre, and for friend paths, my favorite was Forage.
It is a bit hard since I did enjoy writing them all, but I am in complete agreement. I mean, to be fair, Pierre and Zipper were the two canon romances in the original story, so I'm probably just being a little bit biased. As for friendships, I do think that Forge's is the most relatable and enjoyable for me. I do find that film and television and music are such a great way to bond with someone and to remember them when you're apart.
I'd have to say my favorite route is probably Zorge, or as you may know them, Zipper and Forge. Friendships like that really mean a lot to me, especially because I have people like John in my life. I find just something so sweet and pure about it, that kind of friendship, that kind of connection. I really, really love their commitment ceremony. I just absolutely love that scene and that concept. I really wish there was a real recognized version of that in real life.
Was Pierre included specifically for players who didn't want to romance a robot, or was he sort of always part of the plan?
Yeah, Pierre has always been there. He and Zipper were the two options I had in mind for the interactive blog. We find that most people don't want to romance him because they'd prefer to romance the robots, but I do think that he plays an important role, and his route definitely was one of my favorites to explore.
I love that Pierre was bi/pan. I think he said he's okay with either term. I'm like that too, romantically, because I am ace. And that NB's asexuality was not a point of contention between them, and neither was their gender. He's respectful of their aceness and asks questions when he's unsure of certain things. But he asks politely and is also okay with the possibility that NB might not want to talk about it further. I thought this was awesome, because there's a weird stereotype around bi and pan people being these wild, hypersexual beings all the time, and he definitely broke that mold. Did you feel like including an allosexual character who loves an ace person without trying to change them was an important theme to include?
Yeah, absolutely. Relationships between ace and allo folks happen all the time, so it was something I wanted to show in a healthy way. And I do think it was very important that a human filled the role of the allosexual versus a robot.
So, in one of the endings, Forge and Zipper get married as best friends. This is one of my favorite outcomes in the game. I love seeing stuff like that. I love it so much that my first longer length video on my channel was about deep platonic relationships and the ways in which they are perceived. Would you say that Zipper and Forge are in a queer platonic relationship? If you are unfamiliar with the term, a QPR is essentially a committed, intimate relationship between significant others whose relationship is not romantic in nature.
Yeah, Zords are 100% in a QPR, and NB's actually their biggest supporter even when they're in a relationship with Zipper. It was one of the endings that I really wanted to add after initial launch, especially when we were getting more and more comments about the relationship and how people love them. There was a bit of lore around the Guardians that we didn't really explore, mostly the relationships between the different bots and how they became a unit. The TLDR with Zorge is that they bonded through their mentors. Zipper would often get transferred to other units, and Forge would be offered advancement, but Forge would always request to be with Zipper so that he wouldn't be alone.
Speaking of endings, can we talk about that one horrifying Sero ending? I feel like I don't even need to tell you which one, because I'm sure you've seen some of the reactions online to it. People were shooketh. It literally gave me chills and creeped me out to my core, and I love horror and don't get scared very often. It really creeps up on you, and you don't see it coming, especially from a path with Sero, who is one of the most happy-go-lucky characters in the game. I am so curious as to what you both have to say about this one ending in particular. What were the intentions, the inspirations? Give me the deets.
Sarah wasn't actually originally in the story, and mental health was covered by Zipper as well. But when Anne and I discussed the game, she wanted to add a femme-presenting character that was a dateable option, as well as a more creepy route.
So I'm pretty big into visual novels, especially horror, but even ones that aren't horror have this trope of one of the endings being a little spooky or surprising compared to all the other endings, which I thought was super cool and fun. And I pitched that to John about a Yandere ending because that was popular at the time and I was pretty obsessed with it myself. So I was like, hey, we should do this. And then he was kind of like,
No, it definitely didn't fit the vision of what I wanted, but I did want to incorporate something that was a little bit more creepy without going too overboard. Essentially, whatever bug that Sero has is just amplifying her emotions, specifically her love and her grief. She likes NB and wants to remain connected to them and protect them while also being in complete denial and unable to cope with the fact that NB's gone. Her intentions aren't sinister. They're literally just Sero going, I'm going to take care of them and make sure that they aren't alone when they finally wake up.
I noticed there's a lot of potential pop culture references wrapped up in Fern's design. Their design as a robot kind of reminded me of the film The Iron Giant, and the little dragon around their arm looked like Haku's dragon from Spirited Away. Were there any other pop culture references like this that may have gone over my brain foggy little goblin head?
Yeah, there are so many references everywhere between the art and the writing, character designs. There's references like Star Wars, Star Trek, Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. There's multiple references to Lilo and Stitch, and arguably the greatest film ever made, Tommy Wiseau's The Room, which makes an appearance, or two, or three. There are also numerous references to space exploration history, and there's so many references that I honestly didn't even catch some of them until years after the launch.
Yeah, I really loved adding references, especially ones that like John said, nobody really caught until way later. I think my favorite one of ours is I ended up drawing a little alien, just one of those green little guys in the background, and John didn't notice that until I don't even know how long later. I think it was years. I just think that's hilarious. There's plenty of other ones in there like that too that I'm sure that he's missed or I've just forgotten about.
Do you have any suggestions you'd like to share for other developers to become more ace and or aro inclusive in their romance or relationship paths?
Oh yeah, there's plenty of things you can do, but a good start I think would be to have things like optional intimacy scenes and low consequences or no consequences for turning down a romantic partner. Allowing people to just be friends would be awesome.
Keeping in mind that asexuality and aromanticness is a spectrum, I think having people that are like at different points on that spectrum would be great just to have the representation. But also keep in mind that you're going to have players that want to play your game because it has a great story, but they just might not be comfortable sitting through sexual content. So just like don't force it upon them. Give them an out if you can. And yeah, that's one more person that gets to play your game.
Is there anything you'd like the viewers to know about you, the team, or the project itself? If you have any new games or projects coming up, I can totally promote that if you'd like.
We are so grateful for the patience and the support that we've received since we started. And we appreciate every single bit of feedback that we receive. Even if it is negative, it only makes us work harder and do better. We're also currently working on an online store, which we will hopefully be opening soon. Then we'll be diving right into our next project. Also, I wanted to give a quick shout out to Crashdroid for the amazing soundtrack, because Ace in Space would not be the game it is without him.
Yeah, so actually outside of the company, I have my own YouTube channel, as well as an art community Discord. My YouTube channel is basically just like a Let's Draw channel where I talk about various topics over top. So if you like the art from the game, it would mean a lot if you were to come and check out my channel or even the Discord. Thank you!
Ace in Space is available for purchase over on Steam, itch.io, and Humble Bundle, and you can find all of the links where you can support them in the description box below, including the links for Candy Cadaver's YouTube channel and Artist Discord. I highly recommend you check them out. For our second feature, I am excited to introduce you all to a sweet little game called Heartsbloom by Curious Fox Productions. Heartsbloom is a short, pocket-sized little game packed to the brim with beautiful art, thoughtful ace representation from an ace writer, and characters you can't help but fall in love with a little bit, which I think is quite a feat for a title that's only about 30 minutes long. The story follows 29-year-old asexual witch Mila Foxglove and chronicles her workday during the magical festival Heartsbloom, prescribing potions to aid on people's dates. Heartsbloom is like this world's equivalent of Valentine's Day, and being a magical world, people from all over aren't afraid to rely on potions to spice up their lives a little bit. But this year, catering to the crowd of eager customers hits different, because Mila is officially in the first relationship of her life, and the relationship she is now in is quite an interesting one. She's dating an allosexual incubus, and as you can imagine, this is equal parts exciting and anxiety-inducing. For those of you who are unaware, an incubus is a type of male demon from folklore that is typically portrayed as being very sexual, deriving energy and sustenance from sleeping with women. Their depictions vary in different stories throughout time, and I don't want to dig too deep in fear of angering the YouTube gods. But for the first time ever, she is questioning how she should approach Heartsbloom personally instead of just providing guidance solely for others. You get to watch her navigate her customers' problems and solve them, and then it turns to the player and you get to choose what tone she should approach her concerns with. I think this is a pretty interesting dynamic, this sort of narrative push-pull, if you will. Will Mila be an optimist and actively practice self-love, or will Mila get bogged down in her insecurities around her identity? That choice is up to you. And there's even an encounter with a mysterious potion that could change everything. I'll leave that for you to discover. Needless to say, this game tickled me, and I was excited to hear what they had to say about the project. So I reached out to Destiny Howell, the writer and programmer for the game, and loved hearing what she had to say about it. Editor, roll to the interview. Editor? Bro, We are literally the same person. Oh, uh, okay. On to the interview, I guess. Thank you so much for agreeing to chat about Heartsbloom. That name is very apropos, by the way. The game was so sweet. I really did feel like my heart was blooming at points. Can you introduce yourself to my audience, share your pronouns, if you'd like to, share what you do, and how this project came about?
Hey, my name is Destiny and my pronouns are she, her. I am a writer of children's books and TTRPG adventures, but I also like to dabble in other spaces such as audio dramas and, most relevant to this conversation, visual novels. For the past couple of years, I've been kicking around the idea of a story with an eighth protagonist where love magic was a key aspect, but I couldn't figure out how to put the pieces together until recently, and ta-da, Heartsbloom.
There's a lot of exploration in the game about what it's like to be ace. In fact, I'd say it's a central theme. What inspired you to go that direction in particular in your game?
Heartsbloom is a game that exists partially because of a moment of frustration I had one day last year. I was in the mood to read something romantic, but I couldn't find much ace content, and the stuff that I did find wasn't really what I was looking for. And it was doubly frustrating because there's so much romance content out there. Anything, like there's such specific things you can find, and not just like the niche, things people are interested in. Also, there's been, this expansion in, diversity in the past couple of years, which is great, but I still felt left out, which sucked. And obviously, you can still enjoy a story without seeing your exact experiences reflected one to one in it. But sometimes you want to see yourself and, see the fun things that could happen for you and project onto it a little bit. That's part of the fun of romance. And it can feel really, really lonely when it seems like everyone is invited to do that except for you. So, like I said, it was a really frustrating moment, but then I was like, come on, Destiny, you are a writer. You can do something about this. Um, Romance isn't my usual genre to write in, and the idea of writing a novel, which is my usual go-to, felt too daunting, but I'd recently made a visual novel for my MFA thesis, and that seemed like a good middle ground. So the next day, I had one really long marathon writing session and I got a whole draft out. And the entire time I was thinking, I don't know how this is going to turn out, but I just really want to help somebody feel a little less frustrated than I did. So that's why I leaned into the ace theme so hard.
If you were the team or aspec, is the ace content based purely off of your own experiences, or did you consult others in the community for their viewpoints as well? If you did consult, was that done on Avon, Friends, somewhere else?
I'm Ace, and the Ace content in Heartsbloom is mostly based on my own experience. Obviously, it's not one-to-one. Mila's job is way cooler than mine, and I, unfortunately, have not run into any adorable single bakers yet. But Mina's inner monologue is informed by and extrapolated out from my own thoughts and opinions.
Okay, before we talk about her more, can I just say Mila is adorable? Well, they all are. The art style and her character design is just to die for. I saw that the art is done by an artist named Sturkey Hertz. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. Of course, I will share their socials in the description box, as well as yours and everyone else that's being featured. I'd love to hear a little bit more about the art and the direction, and if it was totally up to the artist, or if maybe you as the writer had a vision of these characters in your head that you communicated to the artist. I would love to hear about that.
Once I finished the script for Heartsbloom, I needed an artist, and I hit up Sturkey right away. I already knew she was awesome because I'd worked with her on my MFA thesis game, A Tale of Two Sisters, and that was such a fun collaborative experience. I hit her up, and once she told me she was available for work, I sent her a Google Doc that had the premise of the game and then briefs of all the characters. So, like with Mila, for example, I was like, here are her vibes, and here are some reference images I got from Google Images. Her outfit should look kind of like this, her skin tone should match this, her hair should match this, and give her a hat like this, that kind of thing. I did that for all the character sprites and the items and potions. But I always like to give my artists a lot of leeway to get creative. Like for the shot background, I gave some reference images, but I told her to basically go buck wild, and I love all the little flourishes and details she filled the room with. My favorite is the Live Laugh Brew poster above the shelving. I was only a stickler about design choices if it was story important. So, for example, I told her not to use any bright pinks in the characters or backgrounds because I wanted the only bright pink in the game to be the love potion, so it would stick out and look kind of eerie and out of place when it showed up. But other than that, it was mostly like, here are my thoughts, but feel free to run with any ideas you have. She is a fantastic artist, and I was super pumped to work with her again on this.
The first time I really felt Mila's aceness was when she was talking about administering a potion to a client to forget a romantic memory, and says that often, when it comes to relationship trouble or messy flings, when she erases their memory, they wind up doing the same thing again with the same people. She says, quote, "The amount of people I've had talk to me about magnetic pulls while paying me to wipe their minds for the second or third time is wild. I understand magnets. I don't understand this," end quote. This felt really authentic to me, and relatable too. Was this line inspired by personal experiences, or was it inspired by something or someone else?
Yeah, that bit was just me channeling my middle school slash high school self, totally baffled at the choices my lovesick friends would make. There was so much, why are you wasting so much energy on this guy you've never talked to once? And you're getting back with him again, even though last week you were saying he was trash. It seemed so like completely illogical to me that I didn't even question if maybe I was the one having the unusual experience. I was just like, why are my friends all suddenly acting crazy?
Wait, that is so funny. I literally had the exact same experience. I like that you demonstrated through the enlargement potions people were asking for that an asexual person can speak on sexual topics without issue, but also that it's not always comfortable for us. I think a lot of people reduce us down to being sex-phobic and childish, but I don't think the solution to this problem is to make our fictional counterparts hypersexual and overly interested in sexual topics either. I like the way you handled it. Like, yeah, she can be uncomfortable, but also handle it with poise when it's necessary. It is literally part of her job. Was this something you felt was important to include in the narrative?
Yeah, I feel like growing up, my understanding of asexuality and its relationship to sex was like vampire with garlic, and that wasn't how I felt, so I didn't really think it applied to me. And of course, asexuality is a spectrum, so some people are more repulsed than others, but I wanted Mila to sit in the space that I don't see represented very often of interested in romance, but not really interested in sex, and maybe a little bashful about it, but without acting like a kid who's scared of cooties. She's an adult.
There's a part where Mila has a sort of internal dialogue with herself after an ex-roommate drops by and remarks on how hot her boyfriend is. The roommate kind of makes assumptions, presumably, about Mila's possible sex life. You get to kind of see how Mila, despite being attracted to Cord, doesn't immediately think of his physical attractiveness when thinking about him. Like, she's attracted to him in non-sexual ways, but hearing Sybil immediately refer to him as the hot incubus, Mila really thinks on the ways in which people project normative sexuality onto those who are asexual. She says, referring to someone as hot feels like there's something lost in translation for her. And I think that's a pretty common ace experience. She says his warm smile is the first thing she thinks about. I feel like highlighting these little discrepancies between allonormative viewpoints and an asexual one can be really important for people to understand us. Was that the goal, to sort of illuminate a lesser heard perspective?
That's another scene inspired by a real life experience that I had. I have the distinct memory of being in middle school and playing MASH with some friends. That's like a fortune telling game. And I wasn't able to come up with a list of future potential husbands for the game because I didn't like anyone like that. And one of my friends that I was playing with, who was trying to be helpful, was like, "Oh, don't worry. It doesn't have to be a boy you actually know. You can just pick some celebrities you find hot." And I was so confused at how I was supposed to do that. Like, how was I supposed to know if I found a celebrity hot if I didn't know them? It was like we were talking past each other, and I realized that I wasn't even 100% sure what people meant when they talked about hotness. I think I just ended up picking some guys at random so we could continue the game. And I wanted to include that because there's something really nice about having what you thought was a niche experience and then seeing someone write about it and having that feeling of, yes, exactly, you get it.
I love that Mila, when assessing her relationship with Cord, talks about how he never says he feels like he's missing out by being with her. I think this is something a lot of ace people dream of. A lot of the time, we're made to feel like our asexuality is a bug, not a feature. Or allosexual partners need to either try and convince us to satisfy their needs, or remind us we aren't fulfilling them, yet they aren't thinking of how to fulfill ours. In this way, I feel like Mila and Cord are ace couple goals. Seeing it in a game was really validating. Was that intentional, to show the player that it is possible to find someone who will accept you and all of you?
Kinda, yeah. Like I said before, I wrote this game because I couldn't find the romance novel I was looking for. And I think most romance novels are either for the drama of it all or for the coziness and comfort, and the latter is what I was going for here. I made what I wanted to see, which was an ace protagonist who came to romance maybe later in life than what's usually expected and found a great guy who she was entirely compatible with. I think it's easier to both articulate what it is that you want and believe that it's possible when it's modeled for you, even if it's just in fiction.
She says she's so happy she found Cord when she wasn't looking, and that if she was looking, she'd probably have given up much sooner on finding love. I felt that in my soul. I think as an ace person, the idea of searching for a partner who accepts you can be really intimidating. And with the attitudes I've seen towards ace people out in the wild, I always feel like it's not worth the struggle. And I'd rather meet someone organically. I feel like that must be a fairly common ace experience, right?
I feel like the modern dating scene is such a nightmare trash fire, even if you aren't ace. And then being ace adds this extra complicated wrinkle that makes the whole thing seem like more effort than it's worth, even if the end goal is something you really want. And apps aside, dates strike me as an inherently kind of weird way to get to know someone for the first time, like a job interview where everyone is on their best behavior and you're getting such a curated version of the other person. Not to mention, there's a level of social pressure to quickly figure out how you feel about them so you're not wasting your time that wouldn't exist if you were just meeting them during a normal group hang or a D&D session. Meeting someone organically and then deciding to go on a date because you're already interested in each other and want to see if there's anything else there seems like a way more natural way to do this to me.
So there's two paths in the game, right? I played it twice and got two different endings. Please let me know if there's more. I'd love to go back and replay it if there's anything I missed. But from what I saw, there's one path where you can find the road to self-acceptance by yourself, and one where you need help from Cord to learn to love yourself more. I really liked that neither ending is really a fail state, and I feel like a lot of ace players who are at different points of their journey will be able to find some healing from either path. Or both. The theme of self-acceptance runs deep with this game. Was that something that inspired the creation of this project? To sort of give ace players a healing experience?
Yep, two paths. Throughout the day in the game, you have opportunities to direct Mila's thought patterns to be either more self-accepting or more melancholy and anxious, and the choices you make determine whether you get the pep talk ending or the self-acceptance ending. I wanted to have both endings partially to justify why this is a game and not a short story. I'm making a game, I want the players to be able to affect the ending in some way, but mostly I wanted to have the two endings because I think there are going to be players who are coming in feeling a little down who could use a pep talk, and there are going to be players coming in feeling good and just wanting to play a cozy asymmetric visual novel, and those people could even be the same person on different days. It was important for me that both sides of the coin were represented.
As an ace player who is normally deprived of seeing myself in media, it felt almost therapeutic. Were there any challenges to making an ace-centric game, narratively and or game design-wise?
For me, the hardest thing about doing ace content is that I don't typically write romance, and it's harder to show a trait that is essentially a lack of a trait unless that's the main focus. Like, it's easy to have casual gay rep in a thing without it being the focus of the story. You just have the guy character mention his boyfriend or the girl character mention her girlfriend casually while the group is on their way to fight the monster. But it's weird to just randomly start talking about how you lack sexual attraction apropos of nothing. Once I decided to bite the bullet and just write a romance game, it was narratively pretty easy to come up with a scenario where aceness would come up and be central to the narrative.
Back to Cord, because he's the MVP. I'm biased because he is a fellow purple-horned dude. I loved how in the ending where you need his reassurance, he also addresses that Mila's insecurities inadvertently make a lot of assumptions about what he must want as an allosexual man. I think this is super important as no one, regardless of gender or sexuality, is a hive mind. I'd like to hear a bit of your thought process here and why you felt it was necessary to include this.
I've always hated the narrative of, oh, guys are only after one thing and they can't help themselves, like they're animals or something. Like, if I was a guy, I would feel so offended that the image of what a guy is supposed to be is so pushy and thoughtless and one note. Like, sure, there are guys who suck, but like you said, they're not a monolith. Like, even outside of the conversation on asexuality, it's so normalized that guys are just supposed to be jerks about this, and I don't think that's doing anyone any favors. I wrote Cord the way I did, partially because I just wanted my ace protagonist to get the perfect guy in my little cozy romance, but also to send the message that not every guy is a caricature of a person who's going to berate you if you don't put out by the third date, let alone ever. It might be harder to find your right fit, but those people are out there and it is possible.
Was Heartsbloom made with a primarily ace audience in mind? Did you have any thoughts about how an allosexual player would experience the game, or was this created to just share an asexual perspective with anyone and everyone?
As I said, I mainly made the game with an ace audience in mind, but I do like the idea of non-ace players trying it out because of the cute art style or the other forms of rep in the game, just because they like my stuff, and leaving with a better understanding of asexuality. Media is definitely how I got my first exposure to lots of cultures and identities that I don't share.
Do you have any suggestions you'd like to share for other developers to become more ace and or aro inclusive in their romance or relationship paths?
I think a good first step is to just have it on the table as an option. There's so little ace rep that the conversation isn't even about, is this good rep? Is this bad rep? It's just, does it exist? I'm the kind of person that appreciates an earnest effort, even if it's imperfect. And there are lots of resources online by ace people for, devs that might be concerned about authenticity. For people who are confused about how to write a romance without sex, even for people who aren't ace, sex isn't the only thing that you're traditionally getting out of a full romantic relationship. There are other kinds of closeness and other attractive traits like intelligence, kindness, humor, etc. Those are the kinds of things asexual attraction might be built on rather than just the initial sexual attraction. And I think that sometimes the label of asexual is what's throwing people off more than truly not being able to wrap their head around what a romantic story without sex could look like. I mean, take Cinderella, for instance. That is the prototypical fairy tale romance, but there's no implication of sex within the confines of that story at all. So yeah, just don't be afraid to give it a shot. It's not as alien as it might seem.
And finally, is there anything you'd like the viewers to know about you, the team, or the project itself? If you have any new games or projects coming up, I can totally promote that if you'd like.
Yeah. If anyone happens to check out the game, please be sure to drop a comment. I always super appreciate that. And I have a lot of stuff either recently out or coming out soon. My thesis visual novel is called Tale of Two Sisters. It's a fairy tale retelling, and it's up on my itch page with Heartsbloom. My debut novel, High Score, is a middle grade Ocean's 11 style heist in an arcade, and the sequel, Second to None, is out in December with Scholastic. The second season of my podcast, Absolutely No Adventures, about a chosen one who really just wants to bake, is out now. And Sweet Revenge, my spooky, sugary fairy tale adventure for the Perils and Friends of the System, will be out soon.
Heartsbloom can be found on itch.io for purchase, and all the other projects Destiny mentioned are on her website at destinyhowell.com. I'm super excited to read the books in particular. I actually put in an order already at my local bookstore. Can't wait for it to arrive, and I hope you guys consider ordering it in or picking it up at your local bookstore as well. And of course, all of the links will be in the description box below, as they will be for everyone that's featured. But I'm going to keep saying it anyway, because you need to know. You need to go there. You need to look. You need to see it. Inamorata had me sold on this game with the first line listed on their itch.io description. Ever wanted a hot vampire girlfriend, but you're too asexual for your own good? Yes. Literally yes. All the freaking time, dude. Was this made for me? I wondered as I hungrily scanned the page for more info. I was also intrigued that one of the points selling the game was just one hot dog, which amused me, to say the least. Jokes aside, Inamurata was made by Demeru Makes Games, and it follows Ronnie, a quote-unquote swoon-worthy buff heroine. She is, I can confirm this, she is totally swoon-worthy. And her love interest, Cece, who, yes, is the beautiful vampire woman of her dreams. Except, Ronnie doesn't know Cece's a vampire yet, and they also give you multiple options to not pursue her, which leads to a different ending. Which is nice. We love a game that allows you to opt out around here. This game is short and sweet, like Heartsbloom. It's about a 30-minute experience, give or take. But it took me longer to complete than Heartsbloom. Likely because there is 3 endings with 5 variations, whilst Heartsbloom has 2 endings. Inamurata features a friend group that gives found family vibes, featuring a non-binary friend named Izzy and their partner KC, who suspiciously has pointy ears and sharp teeth. Do we get 2 vampires for the price of 1 here? You gotta play it to find out. The art is stunning, and the music is really beautiful and stuck with me long after I finished getting all of the endings. The game just has this serene quality to it, even when there is conflict. Gives me the same sort of feeling that a hot cup of tea on a cold day does. And you guys know how much I love my tea. And if you're new around here and you don't, my name is DarkTeaTime. I didn't pick the name out of a hat. Eager to learn more, I reached out to Matt De Carvalho, who is the character and CG artist as well as the UI designer. Here's what they had to say. Hey, editor. Dude, don't even say it. We are still the same person. Okay? Got it? Got it. Thank you so much for agreeing to chat about Inamurata. It's such a beautiful little game, and I can't wait to talk about it more. When I first found it, I was like, lesbians, vampires, asexual main character. Sign me the fuck up. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Could you introduce yourself to my audience, share your pronouns if you'd like to, share what you do, and how this project came about?
Hi, I'm Maddie, or Demeru Online. I use they, them pronouns, and I'm an artist, designer, and game maker. Inamurata was originally made for the Queer Vampire Game Jam last year in January. Jessica and I have been friends for some time, and I approached her to do this game jam together, since we're both really into vampires and queer romances. And honestly, I was really excited to work with her. As for the story of Inamurata, I'd pitched the idea of the main character hiding they're a vampire for another game jam that I did, which went unused, and I was still really interested in exploring it. That original pitch was to have 2 people on a blind date. You as the player would need to carry on a conversation without revealing that you're a vampire, not knowing that the other character was doing the same, but they were a werewolf. I think it was Jess's pitch to make it an ace story, and to change it to be over the course of the relationship, so I'll credit her for that.
First off, the art and visuals are fantastic. I like that the sprites' lips moved as they talked and blinked as well. It made them feel so much more alive, if that makes any sense. The art and UI was your domain, correct?
Yeah, thanks so much. I was the one that was in charge of the character and CG art, yes, as well as the UI design of the game. I really loved being able to dive in and make different outfits for Ronnie and Cece, and animate them slightly to bring some more life to the game. Our programmer, Christy, did such a good job bringing it all together.
What was going through your mind as you were designing these characters? Did you already have somewhat of a clear image of them, or is it something you had to work at based on who you knew them to be in the writing of it? I guess what I mean is, were their appearances partially designed by the writer Jess Hutchison and their vision of them? Or did you take their character traits and personalities and create the whole design from there?
It was a bit of both. When Jess and I were planning out the story, we gave the characters their personalities and some of their backgrounds. We didn't go too into details since we only had a month to get this game done, but we gave them each a short descriptor like buff and curvy, bear, and vamp tech bro. Then we gave them a bit of their family history and something of what they like to do. From that, I took off running, sketching each character 3 different designs, and then we had the entire team vote for which ones they liked best. This game was very collaborative. Everyone had a say in basically everything.
So, I remember you mentioning in some of our email exchanges that the entire team that worked on Inamurata was aspec in some way, which is so cool, love to see it. How did you all find each other and decide to work on this project? Was there any particular motivation behind making the game?
I should clarify, most of the team are aspec, ranging from aroace to demi, but I don't actually know about everyone. I knew most of the team before the game was being planned, but Christy was brought on when I pitched the game to the Dev Talk Discord server, which is dedicated to indie game development in the visual novel space. By the way, if anyone's wanting to work on VNs, I would definitely look into joining that one. It's been a really big help. Christy was excited for an ace-centric game and offered her programming skills to the team. As for why we made Inamorata, I think we wanted to make a fun game that included ace people in a vampire story. You don't really see many of those.
That is so true. I don't think I've ever seen an asexual vampire story before this. Was the asexual representation purely based off of the team's lived experiences, or were there any point in the project that you consulted other aspec people? And if you did, where did you consult? Was it Avon, Reddit, somewhere else?
We didn't have a lot of time to do more research than just asking the team. Luckily, we had a lot of different experiences across the ace spectrum, and in general, a wide range of perspectives on relationships. So we didn't feel the need to consult other sources. If we had the time or resources, I would have loved to have consulted more people.
I loved that Ronnie is a sapphic ace, Cece is aloe and sapphic, and I personally loved seeing Izzy's presentation as a non-binary person. At least, I read them as non-binary, feel free to correct me. But as someone who is NB myself, gender fluid in particular, I love seeing NBs that don't necessarily always give androgyny, since there seems to be an expectation that we all must present that way. Was there any particular reason the team gravitated toward this type of representation present in the game?
Yeah, you got it right. Izzy uses they-them pronouns. I feel that diverse communities are always stronger, and diverse casts make better stories, on top of allowing more people to see themselves in the narrative. A lot of my own writing and creations reflect that, and I always try to include as diverse of a cast as I can. Izzy, a big non-binary person who presents like a masked bear and is fully and wholly loved for who they are, for me was the character I wish I'd had when I was going through my gender journey.
Would you say Inamorata was created more with an ace audience in mind, or was there some consideration for how an aloe player would experience the game?
Jess and I had wanted to make a game where ace people could see themselves in Ronnie, and aloe players could learn from both her and Cece's experiences. We wanted it to be kind of a conversation piece for people to dive into, and in an ace-aloe relationship, see what possibly works and what doesn't.
One thing that I loved was that nowhere in here did you guys go down that route of over-explaining asexuality, the split attraction model, and dumping definitions left, right, and center like we're playing through an interactive FAQ. It was such a breath of fresh air to play something where an asexual experience is evident in the game itself without breaking the fourth wall and info dumping. Was that something that was done on purpose, or was that just how it turned out?
Thanks so much for saying that. We really wanted it to be from an ace experience and base it on emotions, rather than dissecting what being ace means like a dictionary would. I think Jess did a really good job with this, knowing what to explain and how. Game design-wise, we had very much decided early on that there would be no bad endings. Personally, I've had not-so-great endings to relationships because of my saying I'm demisexual, and there being a misunderstanding of what that means. Yet, here I am, still living my life as fully as I can. A bad ending in this game, where it's and these two live terrible lives forever, would be disingenuous to my lived experience. Even on a bad breakup, there's always love on the other side. Whether it's platonic, romantic, or familial love, there is always people there for you to help bring back the joy in your life.
Were there any challenges to making an ace-centric game, narratively, game design, or otherwise?
We did end up having a lot of discussions of is this too negative or where is the line on this one in order to make it more uplifting than punishing.
So, throughout the game, Ronnie is worried about how her asexuality will be received by Cece the closer they get. But I like that Cece had her own big secret she was holding, that she was a vampire. I feel like sometimes aspec people are used to our asexuality or aromanticism being seen as a problem. So much so that I think in some cases we can overlook that our new partners or potential partners might have their own worries. Was that sort of the intention here, to show that sometimes we might be in our heads about our aceness, but our partner might also equally be in their head about how much they want to be accepted too?
I don't know if that was necessarily the intention. It was definitely a big part of the relationship that they are both shy about their true selves, and that depending on how you treat Cece in the beginning, she'll reveal things earlier or later, or not at all. I do really like that reading of it, though. We all have our own internal worries about being accepted. It's not always about our queerness either. People can be worried about their bodies, their history, the job they have. There's any number of things that can make people think they're not good enough for someone else.
So I played it about 4 times and got 2 friends endings and 2 different girlfriends endings. I'm not sure if there are more. If there are, please let me know. I'd love to replay it. But in the friends endings, I really love that choosing not to date and stay friends isn't considered a fail state. In a lot of games with dating, and just in general in life, there seems to be this really pervasive attitude that romance is inevitable and what everybody should be seeking. Was it important to the team to make sure that players who weren't feeling the relationship didn't feel invalidated or pressured into romance or other forms of intimacy?
I think that's all the endings you can get. There's a few choices that you can make that can change things just before the endings. Like a bite, no bite girlfriend ending, or a punch, no punch dislike ending. That was the internal names that we had for those. We tried to make it as extensive as we could in the limited time we had. As I mentioned before, that was definitely one of the most important parts of the game, though. We really wanted there to be an option to end the relationship at every date. That Ronnie and the player would have agency to say this isn't working out and end it. I'm big into the idea that platonic love is just as important as romantic or familial love. So them being friends shouldn't be considered a fail state, because to me that's equally as good of an outcome as being romantically involved.
In both of the girlfriends endings, I love that you guys explored asexuality from an angle a lot of people miss out on. You touched on how asexuals can love different forms of intimacy. We can totally love having our favorite person up in our business, kissing, cuddling, lying on top of us, or even exploring non-sexual kink with them in some cases. At the end of one of the girlfriends' paths, they go to the bedroom and it says they enjoyed each other completely. Was this an allusion to sexual intimacy, or was this left somewhat open on purpose so that the player could interpret it in whatever way makes them feel most seen? Up to that point, I was getting the impression that Ronnie was pretty confident that she didn't want sexual contact from Cece in the earlier scenes, but I do know some people, especially demisexuals and graysexuals, can begin to feel differently after some conditions are met. Was the intent here to give the player a chance to present as demi or graysexual?
One of the discussions that Jess and I had at the beginning is what it means to be in an allo-ace relationship. That not every ace person is sex repulsed, and that sometimes it comes down to just not having the interest in it. Sex can still be something that happens in a relationship with an ace person, but needs to be navigated with respect and with a clear understanding of boundaries. On top of that, even if an ace person does get intimate with a partner, it in no way negates the fact that they're ace. I do think it was written in that way to give the player a chance to read into it how they wanted to. Whether the girls just kiss more, cuddle and chat, or do get more intimate, that's up to the player and how they've read into the relationship.
I like that. I think that's a very smart move. Do you have any suggestions you'd like to share for other developers to become more ace and or aro-inclusive in their romance or relationship paths?
Being demisexual, I asked my team for suggestions for this question, since they are more ace and aro. This is what they had to say. Jess has seen a lot of ace people lamenting lately that in most games, romance means sex, and there's no way to separate those two aspects. She thinks that even adding an option for not having sex during the romance path, which doesn't end the relationship, would be a big step forward for heavy romance or dating sim games. Mina, our editor, said that something similar happens with the prevalence of kissing and characters acting flustered on a romance path. She would love to see options to stay friends that wouldn't ruin the relationship completely. Or more importantly, not cutting off characters and players from whole facets of the game's story. This, she thinks, is a really good step in the right direction for aro inclusion. I think making interesting this or that options instead of outright yes or no ones is good game design for really any kind of inclusion of the aroace spectrum.
And finally, is there anything you'd like the viewers to know about you, the team, or the project itself? If you have any new games or projects coming up, I can totally promote that if you like.
Yeah, thanks. The team all have loads of projects on the go. First, I'd love to plug our programmer Christy's work. She's got so many amazing games she's worked on. You can find that at husbandogoddess.itch.io. You can also check her out on Blue Sky under the same name for more information. Our composer was David, and you can find his work on Instagram at David_QuietEye. That's the letter I. Also on Spotify under Quiet Eye. As for my own projects, I have one game going up on Steam in the next few months called Satan is an Astronaut, which can be wishlisted now. It's another visual novel, but a sci-fi horror about a pact made with the devil and the consequences of the main character's choices. If you'd like to see more of my art or get news on my upcoming games, you can find me under Demeru or Demeru Art on most platforms. I am also trying to get back into streaming on Twitch, which is a little side fun for me, where I mostly play old games I missed as a kid. You can find me there as Demeru as well. I want to give a huge shout out to you for bringing my game to your audience. Honestly, it's such an honor. Thank you so much for playing and having this conversation with me. It was an absolute blast. Bye!
Thank you so much for agreeing to be a part of this. It's been really fun for me too. Inamurata is available on itch.io, and so is Satan is an Astronaut, and a lot of the other projects mentioned. They will all have links in the description box. Please check them out. They are absolutely worth your time. I hope you guys consider supporting Maddie as well as all of the other people in this video. And last, but certainly not least, let's dive into our last game for this video. Sucker for Love, Date to Die For. This game wasn't actually on my radar until their business manager, Akatsuma, kindly sent me a Steam key. They really dug the video I did about how romance paths in games fail asexual players and decided to set me up with a copy of the game. While I am hella grateful and beyond honored, please know that everything I'm about to say is an honest recounting of what I got out of playing it. I would never not be honest with you guys, I hope you know that. I respect you all too much for that. That being said, let's talk about the game. Sucker for Love, Date to Die For is equal parts a parody of H.P. Lovecraft's works and a love letter to 90s anime. To put it simply, this game is a Lovecraftian horror sapphic dating sim featuring an asexual main character. Try saying that 10 times fast. Lovecraftian horror sapphic Lovecraftian dating sim featuring the other show. Never mind. Maybe don't try saying that 10 times fast. It's kind of humiliating. Unless you're an auctioneer, I guess. In that case, knock your socks off, dude. I'm sure you're killing it. Anyway, back to Sucker for Love. To say this game is one of a kind is kind of an understatement. You play as Stardust, a young woman who is investigating the bizarre occurrences going on in her old hometown. A place that went from cozy, comfortable, and safe to a danger zone filled to the brim with disappearances, cultists, and black magic. When Stardust's investigation leads her to her childhood home, she discovers not only that it's the cultist's base, she discovers that an ancient goat-like fertility goddess is being held captive in her bedroom. They introduce themselves to each other, and Stardust learns this goddess goes by the name Roxanne. It is up to you to free her from the cultist's claws with her guidance in matters of the supernatural and arcane. And this is where their love story begins. I personally love the contrast between Roxanne being this lusty, sexual being and Stardust being totally asexual and not wanting that from her at all. I love it because it shows how two very different people on different ends of the sexuality spectrum can still fall in love and make things work. While Roxanne is allosexual, she is also used to being taken advantage of, and I think that's part of what makes Stardust special in her eyes. Stardust wants her because of who she is, not because of what she can get out of her. There's a brilliant yet hilarious mechanic where you are given a spray bottle to spray her whenever she gets too spicy for you. You also get to spray it in other people's faces, and you better believe I took every chance to super soak them hoes. It was also a great way to put some control in the player's hands and let them choose what they were comfortable with. Another interesting aspect to this whole dynamic is that since the cult is formed around a fertility goddess, it means Stardust is immune to the sexual energy they use to control people. actively making her asexuality her superpower. This game is honestly the most tense visual novel experience I have ever played, and that is largely in part due to its carefully considered mechanics. The gameplay mostly consists of you sneaking around your home and carrying out different occult rituals, many of which have time limits, special items you need to gather and collect, or specific rooms you need to travel to, whilst also doing your best to avoid being killed by the cultists. It's first person, and you get that sort of old school survival horror feel, but with an interesting twist. One of my favorite things about the gameplay was the door opening mechanic. Hear me out. I know that sounds crazy to be like, oh, I really love opening doors. But to open doors in the game, you have to be more deliberate than just clicking the door or the doorknob or something. You have to actively use your mouse to click the door, turn the knob, and push. Or, in the case of sliding doors, grabbing the handle and pushing it open sideways. The reason why I'm such a fan of this mechanic is that when you're being hunted, it adds a really neat stealth element, and it makes you feel more like you're actually there. It aids in the immersion department. Because in the beginning, when things are less dangerous, I found myself flinging doors open without much care or thought. You know, the way I might do in my own home. But you quickly learn that opening the door too fast and too carelessly can lead you to becoming killed. You can actually see the attacker on the other side of the door sometimes, and if they're facing away from you, you can take the time to decide if you still want to enter the room and sidestep them. Or, if they're facing you and are about to stab or clobber your ass, you can close the door ASAP and get the fuck out of there. This mechanic builds tension fast. It's fantastic. It's challenging, but not in a stupid way where you have to attempt a singular difficult task a million times. If I just described your favorite type of difficulty, that's fine. It's a big world. We can all like different things. But with my chronic pain that worsens the longer I play, I prefer this type of difficulty now. The pacing of the game in general is just awesome too. The build up to finally meeting the big bad guy face to face was tense as hell, and the slow burn romance with Roxanne was beautiful. The writing in general is just really solid. I really cared about Roxanne and Stardust, and even the cultists were really interesting and sometimes charming. I am a huge fan of character-driven games, and this one definitely scratched that itch for me. The ending was amazing too, and it made me tear up. I won't spoil it here, but I definitely will be talking about it in the interview section, so beware. The music and sound design were equally as impressive, and it really helps build a dark, oppressive mood. But it's never without a dash of humor, which is one of its finest qualities. So, as you can imagine, I had a lot of questions for the developer Akabaka, so I reached out to Akatsuma and asked pretty please with a cherry on top if he'd be down for an interview. I didn't actually say in those words, that would be so cringe. And he said yes! Hooray! Without further ado, let's slide on over into the interview. Hey, editor. No, we are not still doing this, dear God. Are you good? Why are you talking to me like I'm not the same person? Hey, you're responding like I'm not you, so we're a lot alike. One could say we're even twins. Okay, for real, we've been working on this so damn long that like recording me and vtubing me feel like two totally different people, you feel me? Okay, interview, start now. Thank you so much for being willing to take a moment to sit with me and talk about Sucker for Love, Date to Die For. Can you introduce yourself to my audience, share your pronouns if you'd like to, share what you do and how this project came about?
Sure. Hi, I'm Joseph Hunter. He, him, I'm one half of Akabaka. I'm the lead developer for Chromatos and for Sucker for Love. And Sucker for Love came about as the full series because when it was included in the DreadX collection, it was like a standalone 30-minute demo that did really, really well. It stood out in the collection, so DreadXP approached me to turn the game into a full series.
From the moment I started, I was head over heels in love with the presentation. The 90s, early 2000s videotape aesthetic was perfect. As someone who grew up watching copious amounts of anime on VHS tapes throughout my childhood, I can confidently say you guys nailed it. The look of the art, the slight grain effect without it being overboard, even the voice acting felt reminiscent of the way voice actors in that era delivered their lines. Were there any specific anime influences or references that had a hold on you that made their way into the game? Or were you more inspired by that whole era of anime in general?
Yeah, I'm a '90s baby, and so like I grew up with like Toonami and Funimation. So I was watching the Studio Ghibli movies and Pokemon and such when I was growing up, and so that kind of influenced my art style. Though I actually, for the style of Sucker for Love, pull a little bit earlier than my time. I pull kind of '80s and early '90s, and so stuff like Urusei Yatsura and Golden Boy are sort of the strongest aesthetic influences. Sailor Moon as well. But for the most part, the sort of how I grew up with anime kind of influenced the aesthetic, because I'd be able to look at like a CG or a sprite or an effect to be like, that looks good, but it looks good in the wrong way. And so it kind of having grown up seeing this stuff for so long, like exclamation marks that pop up when a character's excited, or the teardrop that appears when somebody is disappointed, like that sort of era and league of anime stuff all kind of come from a place of like authentically watching this stuff for just so long, and kind of grew up alongside it. And so Sucker for Love has kind of just been a love letter to sort of that anime that I grew up with, and then the stuff that I watch these days, which is the earlier stuff.
So, in my email exchanges with your business manager, Akatsuma, she mentioned that you weren't ace yourself. As someone who isn't ace, what motivated you to center an asexual character in your game? Was it something that developed naturally, or was it part of the plan from the start of the project?
No, it was not the plan from the beginning. She was originally just going to be full-on disaster lesbian, but kind of her role in this series became more and more clear the longer we worked on the project. She's there as a foil to D from the first game, and also who's Lust Incarnate. She's also sort of a foil to Roxanne, who was like goddess of lust and fertility, and also a foil to Buck. And so I was just iterating out on these scenes and writing her dialogue, and I'm just sitting on the couch beside my wife, and then I was like, honey, I think she might be ace. Like, just because of the way that the story was pulling her. She's, supposed to be opposite to goddess of lust and fertility, opposite and foil to D. I was like, wait a minute. She's not disaster lesbian, she's ace. That's kind of what, all the pieces immediately started clicking into place as soon as we kind of realized this. It was kind of the character that she was always supposed to be. Like, there was one huge plot hole that I had up to this point, which is, why isn't Stardust affected by the Sacramento Stare? The thing that amplifies lust 1,000-fold of anyone who comes anywhere near the Black Woods. And, just the infinity times zero thing be equaling zero was such an obvious solution, but I hadn't thought about it until I sat down and started realizing, hey, wait a minute. So the character sort of came to life and grew a mind of its own the longer I worked with it. And very naturally, over the course of development, just felt right to have her just be ace. Like, once I started realizing that she's ace, it started to basically, just became really clear to me that this couldn't have been any other character. This couldn't have gone any other way. The only way this story works with this character is if she is ace.
I love the treatment of Stardust's asexuality, by the way. I find some people outside of the ace community, when they write us, they do what I call jazz hands representation, where they have to keep having the character proclaim their aceness and rattling off definitions left, right, and center. Call it jazz hands because it's kind of like they're waving their hands at you going, guys, look, ta-da, they're ace. They're so ace, guys. And it kind of overrides everything else about them as a character. But I like that in Sucker for Love, Date to Die For, Stardust is just ace. It's really nonchalant, and I love that. Was that a deliberate choice to handle Stardust that way? And if so, was it to avoid that awkward style of representation?
Absolutely. I pulled, since I haven't really written gay characters before, I took a lot of inspiration from what I consider to be pretty good role models for queer representation in queer media. And so I studied, like, Steven Universe, for instance. Nearly every relationship in that show is women loving women. And yet, at no point, at any point in the show, do they say the word lesbian, sapphic, gay, etc. They just, have two characters that are female presenting and love, and kind of leave it to you to, come to the obvious conclusion. And I thought that's probably the best way of going about this. Kind of not doing the, like, as you said, the jazz hands ace representation, just having Stardust be ace, having come up in conversation once, and then just having that just be one facet of the gem, and letting this character's actions sort of speak for themselves. Let the viewer, the viewer isn't dumb. They'll figure out that she is ace from the context of the story and from the interactions she's having with Roxanne. And that kind of worked out really well. I'm glad that it did. And I kind of owe it to looking to Steven Universe as like a role model for this kind of representation.
What were the challenges, if any, to including an asexual main character in your game? Were there any specific strategies you employed to avoid misrepresenting asexuality?
Actually, it was kind of easier than I thought it would be. I didn't hit any major hurdles besides my own fear of like getting things wrong, which was just assuaged by consulting with ace folks in my community, my ace friends, just to make sure that I am kind of on the money with what aceness is, just to make sure I don't make any huge errors, because there's all sorts of types of ace I now know, and I think the kind of best strategy I employed to avoid misrepresenting aceness is by just having the fact that Stardust is ace be one asset of her character, as opposed to one facet of the gem, as opposed to being this all-consuming token that that she's the ace character and everything she does is related to her being ace. I feel like is a good way to Flanderize it and get it completely wrong. So I tried to make sure that she had a lot of depth, related to, around, and also beside her aceness.
I seem to remember Akatsuma mentioning how you were deliberate in your game design with how you included asexuality to avoid scope creep. Would you mind speaking on that? I am always interested to hear the different approaches, not only to game design, but with the inclusion of ace representation in media as well.
I think she's talking how about at one point there was talks at my publisher of including like a straight male protagonist as like an alternative if someone didn't want to play as Stardust, which was scrapped. A, because it would just double the amount of art assets that we had to do at any point, but B, and kind of the biggest reason, was just because I wrote this story about this character. Stardust is not pants, she's not interchangeable. She is the main character of this story, and I felt like it was a disservice to say, hey, this other person that you can play as could have filled the same exact role in this story. So, yeah, scope creep, as in we didn't include the straight male character, but the bigger personal reason was I feel like it was a disservice to Stardust to do so.
Did you consult any ace people, and if so, where did you do so? Was it friends, Avon, somewhere else?
So, the person I consulted was the younger sister of a girl I dated in high school. I know, kind of a really, it's like so many degrees of separation, but she was, somebody that I was on speaking terms with that is ace, and I thought, this is, the perfect resource to make sure that I'm on the right track with ace representation. I think she's the first name in the special thanks category for this reason.
Do you see Stardust as any particular intersection of the aspec community? For clarification, asexuals who experience romantic attraction will often identify as asexual and something else. Like, for example, I am biromantic and asexual. Or, if the person is only interested in the same gender, homoromantic and asexual. Would you say Stardust is homoromantic, biromantic, panromantic, or something else entirely?
Yeah, I've given this actually a lot of personal thought, and I think she's pretty pan, to be quite honest. As you kind of see her going through each of these arcs and, befriending and endearing herself to every single member of the Thousand every single time they try to kill her, she kind of gives off this sort of Pollyanna, there's something to love about every single person that she meets, and I think that kind of makes her pretty pan-leaning, if anything.
Yes, that makes total sense. That's the vibe I got from her too, actually. Okay, totally random, but was the discordant ambient sort of noises whilst wandering around the house in Chapter 1 modeled off of the ambient environment sounds from the first Devil May Cry? Every time I heard it, I was mentally being yeeted back into 2001, and I was so here for it. I've talked about Devil May Cry a few times on my channel. It's been a favorite series of mine for a long-ass time. If it's not inspired by DMC, what was the sort of thought process behind the sound design? I think I saw in the end credits that the composer for the game was someone named Extra Spicy. Wonderful username, by the way.
Yeah, so the sound design, again, just all pulls from, like, old school anime. There was plenty of times where we had, like, a really good sounding track or a really cool sounding like sound effect, but it was like good in the wrong way instead of being bad in the right way. And so the fact that it kind of sounds similar to this game, the Devil May Cry similarity purely coincidental, but the fact that it sounds so similar, I think it just kind of speaks to how much we really did kind of restrict ourselves to only what suits the aesthetic of 90s and old school anime.
The music was fantastic. I am curious about that one track with the Japanese singing that is blasting on the TV at one point. How did that come about? Was it an authentically Japanese song? Because if that was an emulation, it was wildly accurate to that era and genre of music. Also, let's just talk about the music in general. I am curious as to how that was handled.
So yeah, we go so extra with the music in this game. That is a unique track to Sucker for Love. There's actually two that play off of the TV from the Idol music. The composer is Extra Spicy. It is sung by Chisana, who voices the idols from Chapter 3 in this game. And the lyrics are written in Japanese by Geiki. And these are all people that were involved with the Sucker for Love project. Yeah, we were really kind of going for the kind of music that you hear blasting from some burnt-out speaker at an anime convention circa 2005. So super, peppy, poppy, super old school, super vintage kind of stuff, like Hara Yukai type stuff. So, yeah, we were really just trying to go for, that old school sort of, you're walking by an anime convention and then this is blasting out of a DDR machine or out of a panel where they're violating the noise rules of the convention.
Can I just say this spray bottle mechanic is brilliant? When or why did it occur to you to add this as a mechanic to the game? As an Ace player, I appreciated it so much every time Roxanne got too spicy for me.
Yeah, so the spray bottle mechanic came as we moved from Sucker for Love First Date to Sucker for Love Date to Die For, because the first game, you kind of could set your own mileage as the player, because you were the flirty one was the player character, D. He's the one making all the moves, and the girls are mainly playing catch to his advances. And so if you don't want to flirt with this character, then you just don't interact with them. You don't pick, the options that you don't like, and you kind of can set your own mileage. This time, it's kind of the god flirting with the player, and the player can't really control the speed at which she's going to be making her move. And so this was kind of, it was a consideration of that. Maybe she's moving too fast to be comfortable for some players, but also the fact that, this is gonna show up in a convention hall. This is gonna show up on streams. This is gonna show up on YouTube of big YouTubers. So we kind of wanted to be able to set the content rating indirectly by being able to have the scenes be spicy, but also in case of necessity or comfort or comfort. You could dial it down. You could cut a scene short if you're running like a PG YouTuber stream, or or if we're on a stream showroom floor. We don't want to show Roxanne getting hot and heavy in the middle of who knows, kids could be walking by and such. And so it's kind of a just kind of a artificial way to set your mileage in the same way that you kind of could in the first game.
Interesting. I hadn't thought of that angle of controlling the content rating for streamers or convention halls. That's very interesting. I noticed that Roxanne, despite being totally into Stardust, doesn't ever mistreat Stardust, even when Stardust is spraying them in the face with the water bottle. I feel like it would be so easy to include some aphobic type of lines of her cursing Stardust for not being DTF, but she didn't. Was this specifically not to shame Ace players who are feeling uncomfortable in these moments?
Yeah, there was one line of dialogue, I think, when Roxanne calls Stardust blasphemously abstinent, but it's said in the same breath as, "You may be that, but you're also the only one who can help me. Your life is your own. I'm sorry for losing my composure." And that kind of was kind of exactly what you said. It was kind of there to say, hey, the fact that she's the goddess of lust and fertility, and you are Ace. This is a point of friction between these characters, but I am not trying to, neither I to the player or Roxanne to Stardust, there's no intention of shame involved here. It's just this is supposed to be like a point of like chemistry or counter chemistry, and not a point of like anger, hostility, or shame of any sort.
Did anything in particular inspire you to center a sapphic relationship as the central romantic relationship?
So I listen to what the people on Discord and Twitter say, and kind of between the first and second games, like one Twitter user added me saying, "Hey, I loved Sucker for Love First Date. Can we have a gay one next time?" And I was like, fuck it, sure. And that was kind of the impetus to deciding, okay, the next one is going to be, it's going to be Stardust, it's going to be a girl, it's going to be women loving women, because a person on Twitter asked for it. And that's that then kicked off 2 years of work.
Yes, I love that. I absolutely love the door opening mechanic. I thought it was just a neat little stylistic detail at the start, but the higher the stakes get and the more dangerous it becomes, it added a really awesome stealth mechanic. It helped make things feel really tense. And I also loved that you could slowly open the door to peek in and see if it was safe. And if it wasn't, you could shut the door and rechart your course. Was this function inspired by something you've seen before in another game, or was this an Akabaka original? Note for viewer, these next clips from Joseph were filmed months later, so please excuse the time skip design.
Yeah, so that is inspired by this one throwaway mini event in World of Horror, which is like one of my favorite horror games of all time, where there's this one scare where you open a door and then there's a monster on the other side. It was half inspired by that, and then half inspired by, just kind of this relatable feeling of when you're walking around your own home at night, and even though there's nothing there, every door is locked, you still kind of feel your heart skip a beat when you're pulling open a door to the bathroom, knowing that there could be something on the other side. And so it's kind of a great mechanic that lets the player scare themselves for me, and that I don't have to put anything on the other side of the door for the entire game, and people will still psych themselves out imagining what's behind the door, because nobody is going to be able to scare each individual player more than themselves.
Having demonic rituals as a core mechanic was a really interesting choice. I don't think I've ever experienced something like it in a game before. I'd love to hear more about the thought process behind this choice.
Yeah, so that kind of dates back to the very first Game Jam version of the game, where the whole thing was basically just a state machine. The ritual says these objects have to be in these certain configurations to do the ritual, and then if you think you've got everything in the right place, chant. And that was just kind of a very flavorful way of making maybe the most easy game to play ever. It was kind of just a design principle that I wanted everyone who opened up the game to be able to beat the game, and so just kind of arrange the room into the correct way for the ritual to be, and then chant the incantation to check your work. Seemed pretty straightforward. It seemed very flavorful, and it would involve the steps that you would actually do if you were doing a cult ritual. So I thought it was a pretty simple, elegant, and versatile sort of way to handle doing these rituals, because there's lots of different ways I can have you manipulate the environment, like, oh, all lights should be off, or make sure you absolutely do not do this or something will go wrong, etc., etc. And that also let me work into this other kind of horror, which is like rules horror or instructions horror, which is a little hard to explain, but it's basically just if I was to be like, whatever you do, don't look behind you, your mind starts going, oh, but why doesn't he want me to look behind me? What's behind me? It's sort of the horror you get from following a vague, somewhat threatening list of instructions. And so doing these rituals was a good way of doing all of that.
Do the ritual words actually allude to anything, or is it gibberish? There were times where it almost felt like it meant something, but I couldn't quite figure out a pattern.
Yes, a lot of the words are sort of by reverse engineering incantations that are in Lovecraft's works, should translate approximately out to what the incantation is doing. Just because if you take a couple of the Aurelian examples in Lovecraft's works, and then you see which sentences have things in common, if those sentences have been translated, then you can kind of guess which word means what. And so, like, Yagagnor absolutely 100% means 1,000, just because you were able to reverse engineer through Lovecraft's works that whenever Yagagnor is used, the translation includes the word 1,000. And so, yeah, I got super sweaty with trying to make these incantations accurate as possible.
I just say making the protagonist black in an H.P. Lovecraft inspired story was such a boss move. I usually get real nervous when I see something is referencing H.P. Lovecraft because for some reason to this day, people are somehow still denying his very blatant racism. Can you share more about this choice and maybe share some background info for people who know nothing about Lovecraft and maybe share how Lovecraft's works are referenced and woven into the writing of the game?
Yeah, so for the folks who don't know, Lovecraft tended to be pretty agoraphobic. He was, I think, largely described as kind of a shut-in. He didn't really like people very much. And a lot of the racism attributed to him tends to teeter towards xenophobia of, actually, fear of the unknown. I feel sometimes this holds his writing back, just from a philosophical perspective. If you're writing for something that is unknowable and beyond you, it kind of doesn't work if the metaphor is just for the guy living across the street from you. I would say that in my instance, this sort of fear of the unknown works both ways. Like, if you look at the way that he wrote Shadow over Innsmouth, which is about a man going into a city of fish people that all can tell on sight that he's not one of them, and they are all out to get him. All of the support mechanisms, like the police, anyone that would be able to rescue him, is all one of the fish people. So he's absolutely on his own. This was, I think, supposed to be like a metaphor for going through like the hood as a white man, but it also works perfectly well as going through a sundown town as a black man. The feeling of isolation, the feeling of everyone here is out to get me, everyone here knows I'm not one of them at a glance, and nobody is going to come to help me if something goes wrong. I think that makes a really, really strong premise for horror, even if you don't touch on race. I'd say that's one of the reasons why I made Stardust black and most of the cultists of the Thousand not black. Just as if you are black, you'll kind of immediately feel this in your heart of hearts, like, oh no, everyone here can tell I'm not one of them at a glance. These cultists are all out to get me, kind of thing. And so it basically just, it's a little bit of extra flavor for anyone that's experienced sort of like racial horror, but it also is kind of, race doesn't come up in the game. It's just sort of playing to those same threats, because I kind of wanted the game to be as relatable or as understandable to anyone who picks it up, as opposed to just the ethnicity that I am.
Let's talk visuals. The game has such a unique vibe and dead-on 90s anime aesthetic. The environments and the characters are easy to get lost in and seamless too. As someone who loves environmental storytelling and mise-en-scène, I loved learning about the characters and the world through all the little details. I noticed there were 6 people credited for art in the credits, one being yourself. I'd love to hear about the artists who was in charge of what, and what it was like working together to design the characters and craft the environments.
Ooh, okay. Let's see if I remember. So we had Midnight Mion, who did the backgrounds, the fundamental. If you're moving around the house, the stuff that is not any character or object was Midnight Mion. That is my recurring background artist for all of the Sucker for Love games. They do incredible work. I found them after their work on Pantsu Hunter, which was also kind of a 90s style point and click. We had Stephanie Hirschbridge, which was like another background artist. She would have the backgrounds that I gave her. She was brought on after I had the house already kind of drawn, but the problem is a lot of the rooms were kind of same-ish and repetitive, and there weren't a whole lot of details to make the room feel lived in. And so I met her at PAX and brought her on, and she added more like objects, more furniture, and I kind of went to her for some of the monster art as well. We had Cleveland Mosher, same deal, also helped with adding details to the backgrounds. There was Moraine Art, who did the images in the book that go beside the incantation description. So you would see like the name of a spell, and then you'd see some sort of circular image, and Moraine Art did those. She did work for another game with a Necronomicon called Charlotte's Exile, which is made by one of the Szymanski brothers and is quite good. And then the last name, I think, is probably David Liu. He did the eye catches between each of the chapters and is kind of responsible for my art style for Sucker for Love. I moved from Chromatosis to Sucker for Love. Like, Chromatos is like a Persona 5-ish kind of art style, and then Sucker for Love is like this 90s anime, and the bridge between them was the tutorials made by David Liu, and so I thought it'd be kind of fun if I brought him on for just the in-between chapter eye catches.
I was really impressed by the voice acting. How did the process go for selecting actors? Were there auditions, or was it that you reached out to different actors you knew based off of the voice you were envisioning for each character? Really curious to hear about how all this went down.
Oh boy. So every story of how I brought on each VA is completely different. Let's see. Like, sometimes it runs the gamut from just being, yes, I put out like a casting call just on my Twitter, say, hey, I need this kind of VA. Is anyone available? And then I just go through every demo reel that's posted until I find a winner. For the most part, I already have somebody in mind for who I want each of the characters to be, just because I already hear them in my head as sounding a specific way, and usually I've heard that voice somewhere, no matter how long ago that was. And so, for instance, Kid, that's Chris Zambellis, and he one time voiced in a fan dub of a fan comic of Persona 4 from like 10-15 years ago. But Kid just sounded exactly like the way that he did Yosuke's voice from that Hi, I'm Daisy comic dub. And so I was like, I'm going to see if that guy is still around, because he sounds exactly like what I think Kid sounds like. And he was. So sometimes it's like that. Sometimes it's a casting call. But no, I find people all over. Like, the voice actress for Nanny was actually from Gone Wild Audios, which is like a R18 audio subreddit. And I just happened to be listening to some of these clips, and I was like, oh, hold on, this one sounds amazing. Who is she? And then she just did a Valley Girl voice really well. I was like, I am going to put her in my video game. And it's pretty funny because I reached out to her, and at first she was like, oh, you should reach out to me at my business email. These are the rates, so on and so forth, thinking that it was going to scare me off because a lot of people message her on Gone Wild Audio trying to get free R18 audio. I was like, oh no, I'll message you right there. And then I messaged her immediately from my business email, saying that the rates were good. She's like, oh, this is legit, and found the project, and the rest is history. And then, like, Lonnie Manella, who voices Auntie Nyan Nyan, one of my hacks for making characters is, if a character is older or is like mature or is supposed to be approximately my age or any older than that, I straight up just find a VA that is in her 50s, 60s, or 70s. It just always works so well when players will automatically defer to somebody that sounds older than them, and Lonnie Manila also happens to just voice everything. I put out a casting call, if you could call it that, on my Twitter saying, hey, do I have any mutuals who are VAs that are in their 50s or older by any chance? And then Lonnie Manila responded, what can I help you with? And I looked her up, and she's voiced everybody ever. Rouge the Bet, Ivy Valentine. And so I was like, okay, works for me. And completely knocked it out of the park. But yeah, the way I end up hiring these VAs, no two stories are the same. They're all completely wild.
So in the sequence where you have to return the keepsakes, I instantly recognized the character who was a dead ringer for the girl from Perfect Blue. Funnily enough, I have never actually seen it for personal reasons, so it's ironic that's the character I recognized, but I was wondering if each of the characters you return the keepsakes to were an homage to specific anime characters. And if so, what were each character's source of inspiration?
I don't know how everyone catches that one. I didn't think it was that obvious, but yeah, that is definitely a homage to Perfect Blue. That was the only one I think was a direct homage to any other character. I think Nanny is a character from Initial D. I think that's the only one that's a 1-to-1. But yeah, no, that was just that was, you know, that plus the pop music that plays during that chapter is a direct homage to Perfect Blue. And for the rest of the characters, there was some sort of, there was generally an inspiration that went into it. Let's see. Like, Billy was like Vegeta, a character from Dark Souls. They're just kind of all over the place. Billy was also like Whamu, and I think one other sort of character of like fighting with honor, but also being like super powerful. But yeah, no, for a lot of my characters, I like to find my favorite parts of my favorite characters. Take this part, take this part, put it in a petri dish, shake it up, and then okay, here we go. This is a character that I know what I love about them because they are kind of a lot of the characters that I love from other medias.
I love the name of the town, Sacramento, a sort of portmanteau, if you will, of an American city and a Japanese name. Was this name chosen to sort of explicitly demonstrate that this is an American game with Japanese influences?
Yeah, you got it. Just exactly that. The game is, kind of like the San Fran Tokyo. It's kind of just it's everyone's speaking English. Everyone has, quasi-English or sometimes Japanese names. But it kind of lets me borrow from each culture when I need it to be one or the other. Like for instance, although Stardust is black, and has the last name Akande on her grandmother's side, her familial ancestral home is Japanese style, and so that sort of arose from when I originally was making the game. The house was like a Western style American home, but navigating in stealth in a Western house is just kind of impossible because there's only one or two ways out of any given room. Might have mentioned that earlier. And so I kind of needed to make these four-sided tatami rooms that have all these different ways you can go, bypass, or come in and out of these rooms. And so it just kind of goes back to, it lets me lean on its influences in Japanese style and anime when I want to or can, and then also lets me write towards what I know when I can't.
Was Gigi Alley named after Gigi from Kiki's Delivery Service?
Gigi Alley is another pun. Gigi, if I'm not mistaken, is the Japanese onomatopoeia for staring, and so, like if someone's staring, it's like G, and so, you have the 1,000, and you have the people in Sacramento with a Sacramento stare, and so that was just supposed to be a reference to, it's the alley where you get stared at.
Were the waking up in the library scenes an homage to Fushigi Yugi by any chance? I only ask because there's a lot of scenes of the main character of Fushigi Yugi waking up in a library, very shocked, very similar to how it shows up in the game.
I might have seen Fushigi Yugi like decades ago, but no, this was it was just a recursive sort of wake up from a dream kind of idea. The reason it's a library specifically is because you are, spoilers, in Moo's bookstore where she is making all of the books that you see throughout the games. So it was just a good place to always go back to between each horrific sequence. A bookstore feels pretty calm, feels like the hub or home base between each run. I just kind of liked it for flavor.
That ending sequence was so beautiful. It actually filled me with so much joy and legit had my eyes watering. I'm a big believer in radical compassion and a big fan of characters that embody it, and Stardust has now been added to that list. I think it was such a great way to end the game. Having Buck learn to see the universe with wonder and awe again after countless timelines where he has succumbed to his worst impulses is such a mercy that Stardust bestows upon him. I'd love to hear more about why this was a direction you chose to go with the main antagonist of the game.
Yeah, so every game in the Sucker for Love series is some sort of counter-argument to something that Lovecraft believed. The first game is a counter-argument to the claim that the strongest emotion of humanity is fear, and the strongest fear is fear of the unknown. So I personally don't agree with that, for the reasons that Dee explains in the final chapter. Humans have never, ever been a fearful species. We've always been inventors, explorers, astronauts from day one. Even the most fearful and superstitious people in the world, sailors, still set sail to the end of the world that they knew was full of sea monsters and etc. So, for Sucker for Love 2, Stardust and sort of the plot are sort of counter arguments to the argument that Lovecraft believed that the universe and existence and reality are infinite only in their cruelty and horror. That you have the Earth, and then anywhere that is not the Earth for all eternity, for all infinity, is just going to be horror. It's going to be cruel, uncaring, unfeeling, horrific nightmares. And I don't agree with that either. I think in a universe that is truly infinite, there is going to be infinite good as much as there is infinite bad, infinite wonder as much as infinite horror. And Stardust says explicitly in this ending with Buck, it's like, hey, if you go looking for pain in a universe with infinite volume, you're going to find it in no short supply. And so Buck's reason for being evil is his immortality, is that he is cursed to suffer, to be in pain, and to face horrors forever and ever and ever. And Stardust kind of reveals to him, it's like, hey, look, I'm immortal too now, just to show you the way that, you can be immortal without suffering for eternity. I think you can make the most of this. If you spend your immortal life only looking for pain and misery, then you're going to be pain and miserable forever. But if we go out, we go out and we see the universe and we see its beauty and we see that there is an infinite amount of wonder and good and joy to be had for all of time, you can do that instead. And so it is wherever there is true evil, true infinite evil, there will be true infinite good to rise against it. See Buck and Stardust, and that's kind of the thesis of the second game.
Do you have any suggestions you'd like to share for other developers to become more ace and or aro inclusive in their romance or relationship paths?
Yeah, I'd say, hey, give it a shot. It's there's so much untreaded ground right now with aro and ace characters that would really make your characters stand out if you went full send on it. And on that, some people might be kind of nervous because, trying to be inclusive sometimes can result in backlash, but I present that I think the gaming community and anime communities are both more, they're more accepting of these themes than I think they give themselves credit for. There's this one anime that's out right now. I haven't seen it, I haven't watched it, but it's vtuber. I probably said that completely wrong, but it's that girl with that elf girl with the white pigtails and the elf ears. She was described in this one image, in this one screenshot of the anime that I saw, where she explains that elves don't have sexual urges or drive, and I was like, okay, so that's kind of like an ace character a little bit, if she doesn't feel sexual urges. And vtuber is like at the top of these anime charts right now, so I think at the end of the day, anime nerds like myself would be, super, super ready to play ball with a character like this.
And finally, is there anything you'd like the viewers to know about you, the team, or the project itself? If you have any new games or projects coming up, I can totally promote that if you'd like.
Yeah, so again, Chromatos Dev, I'm on Twitter, I'm on Discord. Stay tuned for stuff related to Chromatos that is still underway. As for new Sucker for Love games coming around the corner. And then a couple projects that I probably can't say anything about just yet. But if you follow me on Twitter, which is Chromatos Dev, or if you follow on any of the Sucker for Love or the Chromatos Discords, there's plenty coming down the pipe very, very soon. So stay tuned and please be excited for all of that.
Sucker for Love Date to Die For is available for purchase on Steam, and the other Sucker for Love games are available on Steam and DreadXP's itch.io page. Links are in the what? Yep, in the description box. Get your hands on these games, you won't regret it. And that's another one in the books, fam. Huge thank you to all the amazing people that worked with me on this one. You were all just so awesome to work with, and I'm so grateful. Please give them all your love and support. Each and every person featured here deserves it and more. And to my subscribers who were patiently waiting for my next upload, thank you for putting up with my chronically and mentally ill ass. I had many difficult physical and mental health episodes during the making of this video, many of which required lengthy trips to the hospital, so your support means the world to me. Knowing you guys always stick around, regardless of how long it takes me to upload, forever warms my heart and leaves me so grateful. I promise my next video will not take half as long as this. I already have most of the footage recorded for the next one, and the script is 80% complete, so please look forward to that one. It'll be in my usual video essay style that I know you all prefer. If you guys do like this format, I would love to make another one. However, I will likely have to find someone else to edit it because I really bit off more than I could chew with this one. This format was deceptively hard for me to make compared to my usual one. If you enjoyed this video in any way and want to support me, feel free to like and subscribe, but no pressure. We believe in free choice around here. If you're new here, hi, I am DarkTeaTime, my pronouns are they, them, and I am a purple sparkly goblin from the Sparkle Dimension. I do videos about asexuality, queerness, disability, and chronic illness through the lens of fiction and pop culture, so if that's your jam, I'd love for you to stick around and join the crew. We have a really great community here. Also gonna start streaming on Twitch sometime this year, so if you want to come hang out with me and play indie horror games and cozy games, or just hang out and chat, please feel free to go follow me over there so you can be notified of when I go live. My Twitch username will be on screen, and I'll link it in the description box below. I'm almost done my spiel. If you feel so inclined, you can kindly tip me over on Coffee. I also do sensitivity reading and consultancy over there as well, so if you'd like my input on a project you're working on, I'd be happy to help you out. And I may or may not have a Patreon on the way with exclusive content to tide you guys over between uploads, since these videos do take a long time for me to finish. Alright, ramble time over, folks. Take care, be nice to each other, and I hope to see you in the next one. DarkTeaTime out, my dudes, dudettes, and duderinos. Peace.